Welcome to Tough Talk. I'm your host, Paul Taros, and today my guest is Shelby Township Clerk Stan Grot, who is currently running for the Republican nomination for Secretary of State. Welcome, Stan.
Thank you, Paul. Good. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me on your program. I appreciate that.
So, what is your background?
Well, my background is quite extensive, so I'm going to be brief. First of all, I spent half of my life in private sector. I worked for General Motors for 11 years. When I got laid off because the economy tanked under Jimmy Carter administration, I opened my own business. I had a restaurant in Hamtramck called Polonia. I had that for about 8 years. I created 21 jobs. So now I didn't only employ myself, but also created jobs for part of my family and my friends. So that's my private sector. My public sector is former councilman from Sterling Heights for 3.5 years, county commissioner from Macomb County for 2 years, deputy treasurer in Macomb County for 2 years, assistant secretary of state for 7.5 years, from 1995 to 2002. And then I worked for Bill Schuette for 2 years in his administrative office, executive office as liaison for Southeast Michigan.
So,
currently, I am Shelby Township Clerk. As a matter of fact, I hold the title of Master Clerk. What it means is it's just a fancy name, but it requires a lot of education, a lot of training. You have to be up to date on certification, recertification as a clerk. And so I hold that title as well. That means I am very well prepared to run elections and conduct elections in fair and honest and transparent way.
Okay. Now, you mentioned you spent 7.5 years as Assistant Secretary of State.
Yes, I did.
Who was the Secretary of State?
Well, I served under Candace Miller.
Okay.
I helped her to become Secretary of State. And once, when she won her race, she asked me to come on board with her as Assistant Secretary. But I had a dual role there because I was also the Ombudsman. That was the only time, and the first time and last time, Secretary of State. Ombudsman is the person that handled all the complaints. When we took over, when Candace Miller took over Secretary of State, it was in very, very bad shape. So there was a lot of complaints coming in daily. Me and my secretary, I had one person working with me. We handled about 3,000 complaints the first year, which is just massive. You had to have knowledge and experience and know how to communicate with people and know how to work with people. And you also had to be very sensitive that we are there to provide customer service. Because these were our customers, the taxpayers. You know, they came to conduct business with Secretary of State, and they expected to be treated fairly, nicely, and quickly. They didn't want to take a day off to spend as Secretary of State like under Richard Austin. You have to take a day off from work. So they expected quick, efficient service at Secretary of State. And it took a while before we got to that point, but I was part of that. I was part of that success story that Candace Miller enjoyed, being Secretary of State, and I did it for 7.5 years.
Okay. Explain to our viewers how the Republicans select their nominee for Secretary of State.
Okay, so there's no primary in our race. In my race, there's no primary. Attorney General, Secretary of State, Lieutenant Governor, Supreme Court Justices. Those are convention races. That means the delegates, which will be elected in August primary, will gather together, and we know that's going to be in Lansing. on August 25th, Saturday morning, and they will nominate Secretary of State, Attorney General, and so on, what I just mentioned. They will nominate the people that will be on the ballot in November facing the Democrats.
Okay. And am I correct in assuming you have two opponents in that race?
Yes, there are two opponents, and it is contested convention race. That's the best way to put it. Whoever gets the most delegates in that room on that particular morning, whoever gets majority of those delegates will be the Republican nominee.
Okay.
My race looks very good. I recruited 1,100 delegates myself in Tri-County area and other smaller counties. So I got a very good base of support out there. I've been involved with Republican Party for many, many years, developed many relationships. I helped a lot of candidates to raise money, to advise them with their campaigns, to volunteer and provide volunteers. So I am very well known within Republican circles. Contrary to my opponents, they just showed up and they want people to elect them and vote for them.
Okay. If you become Secretary of State, what are your top priorities?
Well, I like to say when I become the Secretary of State. My top priority, first of all, customer service. We have to provide the best possible customer service at the least possible cost. That's my motto. The next one is voters' integrity. Elections are extremely important, and we have to make sure that elections have integrity, which means I came up with the plan. I call it 6-point plan, and I named it voters' integrity. First of all, I am calling to require citizens documentation for new voters registering to vote, just to make sure we know that only the citizens of this country participate in our democratic process, because that's what Constitution says. We have to also make sure that there's one person, one vote. People don't vote in multiple states, which is occurring right now. We have to tighten up that particular area. And also, my big thing is photo ID. If you're not in possession of photo of ID, and I don't mean only license, it could be a passport, it could be student's ID, it could be veteran ID, but those are required, and those are admissible. But we can make sure that if somebody doesn't have any form of photo ID, no ballots for them. We don't know who they are at that point. And right now, in 2016, 18,000 people voted without photo ID in Michigan. And all they had to do is just sign the back of the form that attesting that I am who I am, and please, trust me. I'm a Ronald Reagan product, and I believe, I trust you, but I like to verify it. And so verification should be very important to me. The Democrats and liberals are fighting this, but I think we need someone like me that will take him head on and with guts and conviction and said enough is enough. We need to clean up our election system. Otherwise, we're going to continue with incompetence, potential fraud, and not knowing what the heck's going on in our democratic elections.
Okay. Now, you said how many people voted in 2016 without?
18,000 people without photo ID. And as you know, Trump won only by 10,000 votes. That's how important it is.
Yeah.
It's extremely important. That's another one we need to button that up. The last one is my favorite, is that we have a lot of people that are voting on behalf of dead people. Just in Detroit, last 2016, and it's proven. It's not. Don't take my word for it, but 2/3 of the precincts in Detroit, there were actually more people voted there live in those precincts. That means these names, these voters came from somewhere, And I believe we know where they came from, but this is not true democracy. This is not how the system should work, and we need to fix it. We need to correct it very quickly. Otherwise, we're not going to have true, honest, and fair, transparent elections.
Okay. Now, I believe in your plan, you want to audit cities and townships that lack competency to conduct elections.
True, yes.
How would you identify these municipalities?
Well, a couple different ways. Just so you know, this is going on right now on very limited basis. That means randomly, Secretary of State is picking the communities and precincts and say, okay, I want to go to Shelby Township, I want to go to Bloomfield, and I want to audit precinct, for instance, 2. I want to audit precinct 5. It is being done on very limited basis right now by Secretary of State. What I'm proposing is, when I find out, when Secretary of State find out that there's some issues in the community, I would go in and audit all the precincts in that community. Just to make sure, because first of all, if you want to recount, they could only happen by opposing candidate. It's very costly. And at the same time, it doesn't give me the feedback to Secretary of State what really is going on in that community. I would go a little deeper, and knowing, for instance, if there's a complaint, if there are a lot of complaints, if clerk runs out of ballots, like it happened in a couple elections in communities, I would go in and I want to find out how those ballots were substituted and into what. That's number one. Number two, I want to know if those people were actually turned away from actually voting. I would like to know that. We can never deny anybody their vote, because they are guaranteed by Constitution. This is their right. They have a right to vote. And if somebody was turned away because incompetence of the clerk, I want to know about it. I want to go in and assist that clerk. Not necessarily punish it, but I want to assist the clerk so the stuff like that will never happen again. And so this is what I'm saying. Conducting lack competency. It's maybe not by their own choice, but they didn't have the proper training or proper education on elections. I want to give them opportunity to make things better and clean up their acts, basically.
Okay. A number of years ago, I don't know if I've told you this before, I spent 24 hours straight being a poll watcher at the Pontiac absentee ballot location. Sure. And in observing them, run the absentee ballots by precinct through their machine, they came up in one precinct, they were short about 30 ballots. Yes. And so the young woman who ran the ballots through mentioned it to me. She mentioned it to the precinct captain. I mentioned it to the precinct captain on 3 different occasions. What happened to these missing 30 ballots? And the third time she turned to me, she said, I heard you the first time, I just chose to ignore you.
Right. Yeah.
So eventually they did find the ballots and they were counted. But
now let me ask you a question, because this is a question that is extremely important. Were you a poll watcher or poll challenger? There's a huge difference. If you were a poll watcher, she had a right to ignore you, because poll watchers have no. You don't carry any weight as a poll watcher. Your position is to stand at the door and watch. You can't challenge anything. You can't ask any questions. You can't do much other than observe with your eyes. This is why it's so very important. I don't support poll watching, because poll watching is not effective. I am, however, a huge advocate of poll challengers and election workers. Election workers, in my opinion, is the best. So anybody is listening out there, go see your clerk and tell them that you want to work on election day. I don't mean working for candidates standing outside in that heat, 95 degrees. I mean you go and become an election worker where you're the one sitting at the table and processing the voters as they come. You will have a direct access to everything that is going on in that location. So I am huge advocate to, and I encourage our Republicans, please sign up to be election worker. Go see your local clerk and say yes, and there's a shortage of election workers. There is a shortage. So yes, go to your clerk and say, yes, please, can you please put me on the list? I like to work for you on election day. You get pay. Some communities pay anywhere from $140 to $190. Not only are you there as a witness and you can challenge and ask questions, but you also get pay. You get rewarded. Now, poll challenges is another one very important, because then you get the ID from the county party, and at that point, that person cannot ignore you, because you carry a very important authority. You're there to challenge, and so you get to stand behind these people that are working. And if you see something that it's not right, you can stop it. And you said, excuse me, I'm challenging this. That's how important it is, challenging and watching. Poll watching, in my opinion, it was basically years and years ago, is to identify the voters going to vote, that voters that didn't look like me and you. And actually, that kind of stuff ended up in court. That was a Hamtramck case where people were unfairly targeted because they didn't look like me and you, or maybe they didn't dress like me and you. And so I would stay away from poll watching, because it's basically very ineffective. But poll challenging and election workers, those are the two that we must encourage our Republicans. And by law, you have to have so many Republicans, so many Democrats working in each precinct. That's the law. Mm-hmm. In Detroit, how many Republicans do we have there?
Not many.
So what happens in that case like that? The clerk will say, well, who wants to act as a Republican today in this election? Well, I do. Well, you are staunch liberal Democrat, and you are going to represent my interests, Republican interests, but you swear and attest that, yes, I will represent your interests today. But do they? So this is what's going on. Detroit, we need to encourage a whole lot of people to volunteer and work in Detroit. It's a long drive. It's maybe not as appealing because, the area where the poll locations are, but it's still very important, because if we don't clean up the Detroit mess and we don't have our people witnessing what really is going on, Republicans will never win a whole lot of races. And we know that because 2016 proved to us how incompetent that clerk is, where 2/3 of the ballot boxes, after they came back, they're supposed to be properly sealed. The seals were broken. And once the seal is broken on that ballot box, you can't recount it. You cannot even see what's in that box. This is how important it is that we have our people being there and challenging and observing. I want to stay away from watching, because watching, first of all, as a poll watcher, they don't even let you go near the table. You're going to stand at the door, and that's as far as you're going to go and watch, without touching, saying, or challenging. So that's how important this stuff is. And it takes someone that has experience to understand all that. My opponent somewhere in Antrim County. She was on the radio the other day, and she's promoting poll watching. Because she has no clue what that really means. She doesn't understand the difference between poll watching, challenging, and workers. And the radio person, the radio director there, he was cheering her on. Yeah, we need more poll watchers. We need poll watchers. You got to be careful. You have to understand the process before you actually put that information out there to the people, because people do repeat that. They go to the neighbors and say, yes, we need more poll watchers. No, we don't. We need poll challengers. Big difference.
Okay. Honestly, I don't remember if I was a watcher or a challenger. I just don't remember.
Yeah.
But I do remember my Democratic counterpart. He left at around 9 o'clock that evening to go to a victory party for, I think it was Verge Bonero. And it turned out he did not win. But I stayed till 7 the next morning. And probably around 2, 3 in the morning, the precinct captain said, you can go home and I'll call you with the information.
That's right.
And I said, no, I want to stay and watch you. They have the little ties that they would seal up.
Seals, yes.
And I said, I wanted to stay until those were all sealed.
Well, the Democrat, your counterpart left because he was confident that the clerk in that community will represent his area, his interests, so he didn't have to stay there. Where on the other hand, you didn't have anybody to watch out for your party or your interests, so you had to stay there.
Right.
But yes, by law, in every precinct, there has to be Republican representative and Democratic representative. And if there's a controversy, for instance, if there's a ballot jam in the machine, and the chair, because each precinct have a chair, and the chair goes in there and opens that machine, she must or he must have those two witnesses. That means she must have a Democrat and Republican watching to make sure that at that point, no extra ballots go in that box. Is it happening? I doubt it. I mean, it's happening in many, many areas, but I guarantee you, in some areas, it's not being observed simply because there's not enough Republicans volunteering to work. Mm-hmm. And by the time the election is over, and all these boxes are sealed and then broken, the seal is broken, my opinion, on purpose, so you don't recount it. It's too late. It's too late because the numbers are published, and there's not much you can do.
Certainly seems like you have a lot of experience in this and are very knowledgeable.
I do. I'm Shelby Township Clerk for, like I said, Master Clerk for 6.5 years. Continue education, and I learned the most current stuff when I go to these seminars, webinars. I go to a seminar once a year to Central University. We got the best presenters with the most current knowledge on management, supervisory, elections, even how to behave and how to treat customers, all this stuff, and we learn that. And at the end of the 5 days, we get certificate certifying us. And this is how I earned Master Clerk's title, certifying that, yes, I am the expert in my field. So I run elections. I've been there 6.5 years now in Shelby Township. Population of 80,000. I got 58,000 voters. I tell people it's just a small community, but I have 30 precincts, 30 locations, and I got about 360 people working for me on election day for one day. And I always look for election workers. I encourage people to come sign up with me. So I can gain some good experienced workers. But you can go to any clerk. You do not, if you live in Bloomfield, or if you live in Flint, or you live in Shelby Township, you can go to any clerk. We got Shelby Township people working for other clerks. I have people from Macomb Township. I have people from Sterling Heights that live there. They work for me. As long as you're a voter in Michigan, you can go and apply anywhere you wish. It has to be a local clerk. Secretary of State does not run elections. It's the clerks. It's the local clerk that run elections. Of course, a Secretary of State oversees elections. If Secretary of State maintains a qualified voters file, Secretary of State provides a lot of information on training. Like I said, we have those webinars and where there's a flow of information and so on. Secretary of State provide a lot of important tools for us, but provide, and we have to implement.
Okay. Now, there's a move to put biographic and biometric data into the enhanced driver's license.
Yes.
What's your feeling of that?
Well, I think the government has already too much information about us. If it's done with proper intent to improve customer service without infringing on people's rights, I haven't seen it. You said there's a move. I haven't seen that. What's in it? But if it will help customer service without infringing on your personal rights, well, we'll have to talk about it and take a look. I know there's this enhanced driver's license coming up that it's pushed by the federal government on us. I'm not sure if I'm in support of that, because the theory on that is that this was recommendation from 9/11 Commission to prevent terrorism. And my question is, you forcing us, the residents, to go through all these extra steps and hoops. My question is, how many of those people in 9/11, those terrorists, would apply for enhanced licensing? I don't think none of them would. So just because this happened, we're reacting instead of acting. And government is so good at that. The bureaucracy is so good at that. We always react. For instance, there's a shooting in school. Wow, something's got to be done. Why can't we act to prevent, to make sure that this stuff doesn't happen? Reaction is very dangerous thing to do, because you acting with very limited time, and you reacting with personal feelings a lot of times, and you watch the pictures on TV, and we got to do something right away. Well, you should have been thinking about this stuff before it actually happened.
Okay.
Those terrorists that came, they should have been observed, watched, and everything else. And beside that, we got a lot of people that came to this country illegally, and this is why they are even participating in our democratic process. Many of them registered to vote, and we know that for the fact they are. Like I said, we have to prevent stuff before it happened instead of reacting after the fact.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to appear here, and I wish you best of luck.
Well, thank you very much, and let me present you with my official hat, and wear it proudly. I don't know if you're a golfer or not, but it has a larger hood than a normal hat. So you have it and enjoy it. It's
okay.
It's my gift to you.
Okay. Thank you, Stan.
Thank you very much. Thank you.